In March of 2019, Neon, Richard, and I set out to paddle the Rio San Juan. We had intended to start from the southwestern shore of Lake Nicaragua and paddle across the massive lake to the river mouth. However, arriving in the heart of the windy season, meter-high waves changed our plans. Instead, we would begin at the town of San Carlos at the head of the river. But this meant first we had to figure out how to get across the lake. Good morning, if you want to call it that. We're at the Blue Morph Eco Lodge in Nicaragua right now. We can't get across the lake because of the wind, so we're looking to get a boat, and a bunch of people were telling us that there was no boat, but the awesome hosts here called around until like 9:30 at night, calling like 5 different people and asking via WhatsApp, and finally we figured out that there is a public ferry that will take us for $6, as opposed to the only other option that we had found was private boat, and the guy wanted $150 to take us 20 kilometers. So we are up and about at 3:21, trying to leave by 3:30. Let's go do it. As it turned out, there was an affordable local ferry that departed every morning around 6 or 8 a.m., but we had an hour-long drive with an unknown number of military checkpoints between us and the terminal. We were there by 5 a.m. and loaded all our gear, which I had thought to be quite a bit until I saw how much stuff the locals hauled on board with them. Their methods were also quite interesting to us. As those of you who've traveled in Latin America know, no public transportation is complete without having a chicken on board. 5 hours later, we pulled into San Carlos. We resupplied, spent the night, and were up and on the water the next morning. While the river was wide and barely flowing here, the headwind was strong enough to kick up some whitecaps for much of the afternoon. I found the wind to be exceedingly calm early in the morning, when the river was like glass and tufts of plant matter slowly listed along. The calm waters were also reassuring, as I thought it would give me a better chance of noticing if a crocodile or caiman approached, as I had heard there was quite a population of them in this river. From San Carlos, we paddled to the lovely little town of El Castillo, so named for the Spanish fort built on the hill overlooking a bend in the river. It's host to one of the only set of quote-unquote rapids along this river. We stopped at the town dock, scouted the water, and determined it to be more a set of strong ripples. We still took precautions and went one at a time. We were met at the other end of the rapids by some curious kids. In 3 years of travel across South America, I've learned 2 ways to quickly gauge the nature of a town is by observing how the animals and the children behave. If the animals are cared for and the kids are friendly and curious, you can feel certain of being in secure turf. Of all the gear and novelties we carry in our kayaks, our sump pumps are widely regarded by the younger population as the most popular, as they're obviously designed for water fights. Uh-oh, 2 on 1. You've given him a mutual enemy. We took a day to lounge around and explore the fort, which had been built in the 1500s by the Spanish to defend against the English pirates. We were happy to look around the sleepy town, which was gearing up for a large festival. Fortunately for us, we made it out of town and back onto the water just as the stands were being erected and people began to gather. A few hours down the river, we came upon Isla Esmeralda. The island had formed around the remains of one of the Vanderbilt Steamers, which had lapped this river in the 1800s. This had been a waterway between the Atlantic and Pacific and presented the fastest route from New York to California at the time. Mark Twain and scores of hopeful gold panners once traveled these water routes, which gave rise to a proposal of creating it into a canal, a project which died in the early 1900s when the Panama Canal was completed. Okay, there was a shipwreck, and then this whole island formed around the remains. Most of it I've heard is rotted away, but the boiler is still there. This is so cool. So, that is Nicaragua. This is all Nicaragua. Oh, that's a track kayak. Nicaragua, Costa Rica. We soon came to the area where the river delineated the border between Nicaragua and Costa Rica, though easements to allow Costa Ricans access to the river are still uneasy. While we were technically stamped into Nicaragua and had to check in at each of 5 military outposts on that side of the river, we were also welcome to stop in the Costa Rican side and spent several nights over there, as it was much more developed than the Nicaraguan side, which is the biological reserve Indio Maiz and is known as El Pulmón de Centroamérica. We ended up spending several nights at the Tapir Lodge, where the Rio San Carlos feeds in from Costa Rica to the San Juan River. The owner, Ruben, was exceedingly friendly and helpful. Richard was excited to help out with installing a wood floor. It also didn't hurt that Ruben was a great fisherman and an amazing cook. We're at our first military checkpoint. In the background, you see Costa Rica, where we ended up hanging out for several days because there was amazing food. We went there for internet, but couldn't find that, but stayed for the food. And this side is Nicaragua, and it's our first border point. At each puesto, we had to turn in the zarpe we had gotten for the previous one and buy a new one at a cost of $1 per zarpe per boat each time. The river presents a variety of camping options, from fancy lodges to tree houses behind a local bar.
This is quite lovely.
Welcome to La Ranchita.
Gates and everything.
All right. At Puesto Delta, situated at the fork of the Rio Colorado and the Rio San Juan, things got interesting. We wanted to paddle south towards Tortuguero in Costa Rica. While there is a border stamp office and immigration official there, after stamping another gringo through right before us, he refused to stamp us out, saying that Costa Rica would not let us in, and the man before us had had special permission. He told us we had to go to Rio San Juan de Nicaragua and stay at his friend's hotel, and asked to speak to so-and-so, and they might be willing to stamp us out. We asked him to stamp us out and let us deal with the Costa Rican post just across the river, but he became more resolute and difficult. We convened quickly, got our passports back, and decided to make a border dash. All right, you guys want to tell us what's going on?
We're being detained by the Costa Rican Coast Guard.
What happened?
We came into Costa Rica without having...
Lauren, they're calling you.
Perdón.
¿Quieres que traduzco? Ah, dale. Okay. Richard, go on.
Go on. Whoops.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. What are we? In Costa Rica now. And yeah, we just crossed the border illegally because we didn't have a stamp. And because we haven't got a stamp leaving or a stamp here, we're going to go get one. So technically we've been detained. This is our fleet which detained us. Well, we just paddled up and jumped out.
We came to them.
But I don't know, Costa Ricans are our friends, so we're all pretty good for now. But yeah.
In the end, after a 36-hour to-do, and with much help from the Costa Rican police, we got to an official stamping station, stamped through, and then back out to the posta and our boats. We were legal, and everything was back on track. We're at immigration in Sarapiquí, where we're going to be transported back to the Chiles border crossing. Tablo, I think they're calling it. They're still holding our passports, but they're being super accommodating and super kind. The next day, we paddled 55 kilometers along canals and made it to the well-provisioned and touristy coastal town of Tortuguero, where our route would finally take us out to sea.